Hi and welcome to this video demonstration on how to create a length-based processing quotation. We've already created part of our customer, we've found our customer, and we're ready to key in our materials. So today we're going to focus in on length-based processing. There is, however, also flat-based processing, and that'll be covered off in a separate session. So similar to creating a normal order, the first thing we do is find our material that we'd like to process. So if we search for our material, the important thing for processing is that because we are cutting the material, potentially we're cutting the material, we don't exactly have to specify the final length in this section. All we need to do is just specify any one of these materials which signifies the type of material that we're looking to process, irregardless of the length part there that you can see. And again, we also don't have to specify the quantity, we just need to specify a quantity to launch off into the processing model. From within the stock search window, we can go into the processing model, and I'll show you how to do that now. By clicking this little length-based processing tick on the left-hand side here, and copying that into the front screen, this will automatically launch into a processing configuration screen. Once we're in the processing configuration screen, there's a couple of different things we need to specify. So in the General tab, which is where the default screen begins, we need to tell the system how many different processes we're going to have. So a process is something that we're doing to it. So process 1 may be cutting, process 2 might be drilling, process 3 might be galvanizing or painting or something along those lines. So for this particular example, let's do 2 processes, and you can see the system now opens up and gives us 2 options so we can specify each of the processes. So if we click on the process 1 tab, we can either use the drop down here, or alternatively we can hit F4, and you can see there the list of various options that are available. So let's specify cutting as process 1. If we hit enter and validate that, you can see that pulls through the cutting process description. For process 2, we can drop down and we'll select drilling on this particular occasion. And again, if we validate, that'll give us the description of process 2. The next item there you can see is the number of line items. So what this is asking us for is how many unique sized items are we going to cut out of this particular profile. So if we're cutting 5 2-meter lengths and 10 6-meter lengths and 5 4-meter lengths, that's 3 individually different sizes. So the number of sizes on that occasion would be 3. So for this example, let's also do 3 different sized items. We also have the facility here at a header level to specify any processing instructions. So you can sort of see the various examples through the drop down. The customer might specifically want the offcuts that are left over to be sent with the job. That might be one of the processing instructions. If we hit enter, that'll validate. So you can have several different ones there in and around specific instructions around processing. Let's select another one for argument's sake. They might want us to grind the edges as part of this particular job. That'll come up as a specific instructions. We can also free text something here and write our own specific instruction. All items to be delivered together. So you've got up to 4 different processing instructions. There is also the facility to capture packing instructions specific to the whole order. Again, you can drop down and select some standard options, or alternatively you can free text something that's specific to the order. Let's, for argument's sake, we want the offcuts to be packed separately. If we hit enter and validate that, you can see that pulls through. So from a header point of view, this gives us a summary of what we're doing. So we're going to have 2 processes. The first one is cutting and then drilling. We're going to have 3 individual sized items. There's a couple of instructions in and around the processing for all of the items, and there's also some packing instructions there specific to that whole order. Now we need to work our way through each of the items and specify specific details that are relevant to each of the 3 items that we've specified here in the header. So if we click on item 1, here we'll need to tell the system what we're doing with item 1. So let's assume item 1 is a 5 meter length, and we need 3 of those. We did specify 2 processes, so you can see it automatically pulls through here the number of holes. So considering we're drilling, it's asking how many holes are relevant to this first item. Let's assume there's 2 holes on each side, so let's just put, for argument's sake, 6 holes. If there is some more customer specific data and the customer may have their own part number that they want referenced, which will appear on the paperwork, or they may want us to mark the particular cut items with a certain marking, or there may be some specific processing comments that are only relevant to this item 1. But for argument's sake, let's assume the customer wants us to mark this product ABC-1. So the reason they probably do that is so when it gets on site, that marked item forms part of a component that goes into that ABC-1 section. So here you can see a length shape code. So if that's blank, the system will assume that it's a square cut. However, we'll do a different cut for item 2. So if we click on item 2, we might say let's do a 4.5 meter length for item 2. And we want it to be a different shape. So we don't want a square cut, we want to probably cut it off at an angle or a miter as it's referred to. So if we click on the shapes button here, we tell the system that item 2 is going to be a different shape in terms of the cut. And then in this shape code drop down, we get a list of various options that we get. So whether we're cutting miter across miter both ends the same way across the flange, across the web, so there's various options there. Let's assume we select the first one there, and if we enter there and validate that, we get a little drawing of what's actually happening. So you can see we're cutting it this way and they're both going the same way, which is what this description is trying to tell us. So here we can either specify the length C or we can specify the angle of the cut. Let's assume that we're going to do a 45-degree angle cut on both angle C over here and angle D over there. And you can see the system then calculates back and says the length of that portion is then 165 millimeters. So if that's what we want cut and we're happy with that, we can accept that here. And you can see it's brought over that description code for the shape cut, really telling us that it's not a standard square cut but some alternate cut. We specify how many we need. Let's assume we need 2 of those, and for this particular occasion let's assume there's 10 holes. Again, if there's any customer part numbers or marking items, let's assume this one's also part of ABC, but it's going to section 2 maybe. We can put ABC2. So now item 2 is basically complete, but it does here specify that it is an alternate shape for the cut. If we go to item 3, we basically now need to specify the individual components for item 3. So on this particular occasion, let's do a 7.2 meter length. We'll leave that as a square cut. We need 1 of those, and we'll put some marking instructions there again, A, B, C, and we'll do -3 for this particular component. So we've finished our 3 components. If we click on item 4, you'll notice that it comes across as blank, so the system knows that in the initial screen here, in the header or general tab, we specified that we've got 3 unique sizes, therefore it opens up 3 unique tabs. Obviously if we have more, it'll keep opening up the tabs, and we'll just keep working our way through all of the different sizes that are required for the customer. Once we've finished specifying each of the items, we move our way through to the right hand side of the tabs and we click on the work center. So the work center is basically a different word for describing the machine that we're going to use to conduct the actual processing on. So For process 1, so remember our first process was cutting, and on this particular occasion I'm in Wetherill Park's profit centre, and let's assume that we're doing our cutting on the beamline saw, so BL1. We specify BL1 there, and it comes and gives us a bit of a description, and it also summarises the tolerance of that machine being capable of cutting within plus or minus 2 mil. Process 2 is our drilling. So again, if we drop down and we select the machines that appear in this list are generally only valid for the process that we're doing. So if the machine is not capable of drilling, it generally won't be available from this selection screen. And BL1 can also do drilling, so we'll select BL1 to complete the drilling. At this point in time, it also brings in the same tolerance. It does give us a proposed delivery date, so if the customer ordered today, based on the current work on that work centre, we'll be able to deliver their job on the 1st of June 2015. If for whatever reason we need to renegotiate a date, if the customer wants it either earlier or later, we can manually override that date. Obviously, if it is earlier, we may need to seek authorization from the processing department just to make sure that they can fit that job in based on all the other work that they might have. So if we're happy with that for the moment, being a quote, we move our way through to the Optimiser button here on the right hand side. So if we click Optimiser, now what this will basically do, will take all of our cut components and it will try and work out what the most efficient length combination will actually complete this job based on the standard stock lengths that we have available in the particular plant that we're operating. So for the purposes of this example in Wetherill Park, if we hit Optimise up here, the system goes away and says, okay, based on what you've entered in, here's the feed materials that I'm going to use to produce the components that you're requesting. So just to talk through the first one there, so the feed material, it'll take a 10.5 metre length, it'll take one of them, and from that it'll cut 2 5 metre lengths, and you can see there it's a square cut. The next one there shows we're going to take a 16.5 and we're going to cut the 7.2, one of those, and the 4.5, two of those, all out of that 16.5 metre length. You can see we do have a square cut, but we also do have some miter cuts there as well. And similarly on the last one, there's a 16.5 metre length being fed into the machine. It'll cut a 5 metre length out, and you can see here that we do have an offcut. So based on that, the system will return an offcut at 10.5 metres. So the offcut obviously won't be charged to the customer, it'll be returned to stock. Some information up here which might be relevant, and it will be summarised in the next tab, but we can see the price weight is the weight that we use, which includes our scrap component, and this will be the weight that we charge to the customer. So there's 1.33 tonne that's been used for this job, but we're actually only going to deliver on the truck a total weight of 1.26 tonne. So you can see the scrap percentage there. We have just under 5.5% scrap, which basically is the little bits and pieces that are trimmed off or offcuts that are underneath our offcut policy. So if we're happy with that, we've got the green light here saying that all looks okay. We basically accept that proposal. We click over to the totals tab and we confirm to the system that we are finished and our process is complete. So if we put a Y in there for yes, the system will then come back and say, based on the information that we've entered in, process 1, which is our cutting component, is a total of 87 minutes. We'll take a total of 87 minutes, and process 2, which was our drilling component, will take approximately 45 minutes. And you can see there again it summarises our delivered weight, which is what the customer will get, and the charged weight, which is what we're basically charging the customer, which is inclusive of that 5% scrap. You can see there we're calculating the number of cuts based on 7 square cuts, and there's 4 miter cuts in this particular job. If we're happy and comfortable to move on, we've captured all of the requirements, we basically back out of the configuration screen and this will take us back to our normal sales order entry or quote entry screen, where we'll be able to see a summary of the items, and we can work our way through some of the pricing elements as well. Okay, so you can see here now we had 3 items come back in. So the first item that we use to launch off into the processing model is what we call our header line, and there's no processing or weight associated with that. It merely is a mechanism to enter our what's called our sub items, which is the items that we will be delivering and that we've cut for the customer. So you can see the first line there is a 5 metre length, a 4.5 metre length, and a 7.2 metre length, and that's the quantities we basically entered into that configuration screen. The exact details of the type of cuts and the number of holes isn't captured here, but considering we did capture it through the processing model, it will flow through to the production orders that the operators will use to cut and supply this job. The customer's standard default pricing comes through, so all up it's just under $2,000, giving us an overall margin for this particular customer of 8.3%, net margin dollars of $139.84. Okay, from there, if we chose to email it off, similar to what we've covered off in the last session, we click on our output screen, we can select our quotation, and if we're going to email it to our contact person, we choose external send there. And CP for contact person there. Okay, so by doing that, that will pull through the customer's contact, the contact person's specific details in terms of their email address. We go to the further data screen, and we want to send it immediately once we save it. If we back out to the front screen, we've only got a couple of things to finalise. The first one is the order reason. What type of quote is it? For this particular example, let's assume that it's a supply quote, and the customer may have their own reference, and may be called ABC-123. So that's the reference that we can use when we are following the quote up, and it becomes quite easy for the customer to track. So we've pretty much entered our length-based processing quote, and we can go ahead and save from here. The alternative option for launching into processing is if we forget to specify it in the first case. So I'll just go back into the details search, and the customer may not have at this point told us that he wants it processing. We may have him on the phone, and he says, look, I want some 310 UB40s. And he might say, yep, I want that processed. If at this point we forget to tick this little button here and we do copy it over, we can still launch it into the processing model. You can see that item's come in here. The item category is the mechanism used to launch off into various models within SAP, and you can see there we've got length main item. So if we change that item category to ZQLM and hit enter, what you'll see, it'll take us back into that processing screen that we were in before. So this is where we specify the various configurations for that that item. I'll just add in another item just for, sorry, that should be the type. I'll delete that first. So on this particular occasion, we're just going to do straight cutting. We validate that. Let's just do one line for the purposes of this argument, no instructions. We might just need a 12.7 meter length. We need one off. Again, we've only specified one item, so item 2 will be blank. If we click our way through the work center, we'll also do this on the beam line. We click on our Optimiser and Optimize button up the top, and you can see there it'll take a 13.5 metre length and cut a 12.7 metre out of it. Unfortunately, there's no offcuts, so the small pieces left over will be considered scrap, and you can see there 5.93%. Again, if we're comfortable with that, we accept. We go into our totals tab and mark the process as being complete. From there, we back out into the front screen, and you'll notice the new item now, the 12.7 has come in, and the customer pricing has also flowed through. At this point, we're ready to save. So up the top, we click our save button. We get some information about the customer's credit. And at this point, that quote has been saved and will transmit to the customer via email. Well, that's all for the processing of length-based items. Hope you've enjoyed that session. Thank you.